Picture this. A volunteer stands in a quiet university room and spins a large, game show-style wheel of fortune. The wheel is numbered from 0 to 100, and eventually it clatters to a stop. What the volunteer doesn't know is that the wheel is entirely rigged. It will only ever land on one of two numbers, 10 or 65. Immediately after the wheel stops, the researchers ask a seemingly unrelated trivia question. They want to know what percentage of the countries in the United Nations are in Africa. This chart shows the distribution of the volunteers' answers, and the results are baffling. When the rigged wheel stopped on 10, the average estimate was around 25%. When the wheel stopped on 65, the estimate jumped to 45%. A meaningless, demonstrably random number from a spinning wheel moved their guesses by 20 entire percentage points. Psychologists call this the anchoring effect. It challenges an assumption most of us hold dear, that when we make a reasoned, deliberate decision, we are pulling entirely from our own logic, shielded from the random noise of the outside world. The data tells a different story. Human logic operates under a kind of hidden gravity. Our minds grab the very first number presented to us and allow that number to shove our reasoning around. And the strangest part is, it works even when we explicitly know the number is complete garbage. The cognitive flaw driving this gravity is a mechanism researchers call insufficient adjustment. When a number lands in front of you, your brain treats it as a starting line. You begin reasoning your way toward the right answer, but you stop adjusting too early. You settle for a number still sitting firmly in the shadow of that original anchor. Take a classic thought experiment. If someone asks you whether Mahatma Gandhi died before or after the age of 140, you reject the premise instantly. No human lives that long. But if they immediately follow up by asking you to estimate his actual age at death, your final guess will skew noticeably higher than if they had first asked if he died after age 9. The absurd number still pulls you. Look at this diagram showing a 5-second math test designed by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. They asked one group to estimate the product of an ascending sequence, 1 times 2 times 3, all the way to 8. A second group was asked to estimate the exact same numbers, but descending, 8 times 7 times 6, down to 1. Multiplication doesn't care about order. The math is identical. Yet because they only had 5 seconds, the students did a quick mental calculation and then guessed. The group that started with low numbers gave a median guess of 512. The group anchored by the large numbers guessed 2,250, and as you can see, both groups anchored low and never adjusted nearly enough to reach the true answer of 40,320. Why would evolution wire us this way? Because anchoring is a mental shortcut, meant to save processing power. In the real world, the first piece of information you receive is usually a genuinely helpful starting point. The problem is that the brain entirely lacks a switch to turn this shortcut off when the incoming data is useless. It's easy to look at college students failing math tricks and think you're immune. You assume that when the stakes are high and the person making the call is a trained expert, they will simply recognize the random number and dismiss it. A group of researchers put that exact defense to the test in a German courtroom study. They recruited highly experienced criminal judges, people whose entire profession centers on careful, impartial reasoning, and handed them a realistic, routine shoplifting case file to review. Then they injected an outrageously arbitrary anchor. Right before the judges were asked to recommend a prison sentence, the researchers forced them to roll a pair of secretly loaded dice. Every legal expert in the room knew they were looking at a child's game of chance. This animation illustrates the horrifying results of those verdicts. The judges who rolled a high number on the loaded dice handed down noticeably longer prison sentences than the judges who rolled low numbers. A piece of literal plastic decided how long a hypothetical person would spend behind bars. Grave expertise offered absolutely zero protection. Decades of rigorous legal training did not act as a shield. The bias operated entirely in the dark, bypassing their conscious awareness and dictating a verdict without the judges ever feeling like they were being manipulated. If random dice manipulate seasoned judges, consider what happens when the anchor isn't random at all. Outside the laboratory, this mental gravity is engineered deliberately, and it is weaponized against you on a daily basis. Walk into any clothing store and look at the tags. You'll see items marked originally $200, now $80. That initial $200 figure is an artificial anchor. The jacket was likely never worth that much, but it forces your brain to view the $80 price tag as a massive steal. Your perception of value gets pinned to a ceiling before you even feel the fabric. Restaurants use the exact same architecture. Menus frequently place one absurdly expensive dish right at the top. The chef doesn't actually expect you to buy it. It functions entirely as a decoy anchor, pulling your baseline so high that the merely pricey dishes positioned underneath suddenly look like reasonable financial choices. This reaches far beyond money. The first estimate a contractor throws out in a meeting anchors the entire team's perception of reality. The first salary you accept quietly becomes the yardstick for what you believe your time is worth a decade later. Even your very first impression of a new coworker instantly becomes an unshakable anchor for all future interactions. Once you see the pattern, you realize that many of the choices you make aren't independent calculations at all. They are simply small adjustments made inside frames built by other people. So how do you escape an invisible trap? A recent study involving professional software engineers estimating project timelines provides a concrete answer. Researchers found that simply warning the engineers about the anchoring effect did almost nothing. But when they actively practiced a specific mental countermove, the pull of the bias was cut in half. The first defensive tactic is called consider the opposite. When someone drops a number in front of you, your instinct is to start negotiating away from it. Stop. Before you adjust, deliberately force your brain to argue why that specific number is entirely wrong in the other direction. Forcing yourself to build the opposite case rips your mind off the original anchor and establishes a secondary reference point. The offensive tactic is even simpler. Set your own anchor. Common negotiation advice insists you should stay quiet and make the other side state their price first. But the data shows that the side naming a defensible, researched number first dictates the terms. A strong opening anchor sets the boundaries of the entire conversation. Your brain's craving for a starting point is a permanent hardware feature. You will never fully delete the instinct to grab on to the first number you hear. Defeating this bias isn't about fighting the pull. It's about making sure you control exactly where the pull originates. A number will always shape your judgment. That is an inescapable psychological fact. The only real question left is whose number it's going to be. Because if you fail to choose your own anchor, you are quietly surrendering your agency to whoever speaks first.